All right, here we go. Today we have Curtis Wall Street Carroll, who became known for teaching stock investing in prison. Curtis is finally home after doing 27 years in prison. We did an interview back in 2019 while you're still locked up, but this is actually the first time we're here in person. So welcome home.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Glad to be home. Glad to be home, man.
Well, I want to get into your whole story again. Because like I said, we did something over the phone a while back, but this is actually something we're going to do in person. So this has a bigger impact. So I want to start in the very beginning. So you were born in Washington, D.C. And you eventually moved to East Oakland. How old were you at the time?
I was probably maybe 11, 10, 11, 12, right in between here, I think, about that.
Okay, so we're talking about late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
This is kind of coming off the crack era in the Bay Area. And you grew up in fairly rough conditions. So tell me about, the family situation at the time.
So my family in DC so my mother actually got hooked on drugs before California. And so already the crack epidemic that was in California was in all the major cities around the country. And we lived in DC, and we lived in Washington, but we didn't live in the bad area. We lived in Maryland. And my mother got hooked on drugs chasing after her husband. And so we moved to California, her running from her husband as a battered woman. That's why we came to California, because she had family here. Her mother was here, my grandmother, I had some uncles, some aunties, and some other family here. So when we arrived, it was like I remember it was a 5-day bus ride from DC to California. And it was kind of adventurous, but like we didn't have very much money. We didn't have any money. And I remember being on the bus asking people to I was soliciting money, hey, I'm the kid always running my mouth. I was doing that even back then. And, people was giving me food and I was essentially helped feed my family the entire trip down.
Wow.
We get down to California and my family, I think my grandmother was supposed to meet us and didn't. And I think we might have even lived in a shelter that first day that we arrived. I think my grandmother's boyfriend at the time, who we used to call my Uncle Bill, he picked us up, took us to my grandmother's house, and they lived in East Oakland. I didn't know the significance of anything about Oakland at the time, but we landed in deep East Oakland. My grandmother stayed on 90th, and I instantly got cool with cats who was on 92nd and Sunnyside, which is one of the premier, especially back then, premier, we don't really use the word gangs up north, you know what I mean? It ain't like kind of gangs, it's more turfs, right? But it's one of the more premier turfs at that time.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay myself, and I lived in Oakland for a while, as well as
so
Berkeley. I know a lot of friends in Oakland.
Right.
I actually lived in Oakland at one point.
Right.
Okay, so your mom is addicted to crack, and your grandmother was an addict as well.
So my mother was an addict, my grandma was an addict, my uncles were addicts, and so like all my immediate family member who I stayed with in California were addicts, minus maybe an auntie, a few people, but everyone else, for the most part, were addicts or selling drugs. So it was somewhere around in there. Man, we landed here and instantly, we got into the streets instant. I mean, it was instant. Like you meet people, hey, and I met a guy, ended up being my brother, man, and he was younger than I was, and he was from Sunnyside. So he was like, hey, I'm from Sunnyside, and he pretty much showed me the ropes. He was like, man, this is what we do, this is this. And his family was like my family. His mother was an addict. He was growing up in poverty, but he had been living in Oakland all his life. I was just coming to the town. So he was showing me how he had been growing up, what he had been doing, and that's how I got acclimated into this stuff instantly. Instantly started stealing. I mean, it was all fairly fast.
I mean, were you taking drugs yourself at all?
No, hell no. No. So I didn't start smoking weed and all that stuff, man, until I was I probably smoked it when I was maybe 13, but I wasn't like, I gotta go get some drugs. That wasn't the case. It was about money.
Okay.
We trying to get money. We ain't really trying to, smoking drugs was kind of seen as negative, especially if you smoked crack or you did heroin. That was seen as a bad thing. So you was seen as degenerate. if you did stuff like that. Everyone who was balling, riding clean cars, they was all selling drugs. None of them wasn't using.
Well, at the time, your family was on welfare, and your mom was working as a waitress at a bowling alley.
In Richmond.
In Richmond. Okay, yeah, I know what that is. And that wouldn't actually cover the bills, so she would actually have to sell her blood for $40.
Yeah. It was a blood bank. I forget where it was. And I remember we used to stand in that damn line. I hated it. And, she'd stand in the line and, you go in, she'd sit there we may be in the line an hour or so. She'd go in there and get the quick 40. And it just really, to me, was like, you standing in this line and people walking by who we cool with see you. Like, you ain't trying to be seen in the blood bank line, the bread line. And, when you homeless and you growing up impoverished, you in all of the bread line, the food line, the soup kitchen. So you making your rounds around all of the places where people gonna tease you and talk about you, where essentially you gonna have to be defending yourself because someone gonna get out of line talking smack. And then the bad thing about it was for us was that we lived in the neighborhood where my mother brought drugs. So now when she come over to the neighborhood and buy drugs from one of my partners or somebody I'm cool with, then I gotta deal with that crap. So it was always something, that came around with, my mom being directly in the neighborhood that we was in, buying drugs from people that we knew.
Right, and you talked about how she still has the needle marks from that time.
She still, I don't know if she got on a day, maybe they might have went up, but she still had the marks on her arm from the many times of going.
Yeah.
I'm just going, trying to, and what $40 gonna do? You know what I mean? So it's like, I could see you going for $200-300, you talking $40, 4 kids plus you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And $40 plus you, and you got a drug habit.
The 4 kids, is it all the same father or different fathers?
No, we different.
Okay. Were any of the fathers around?
Yeah. So and we don't rock with this step shit. We ain't into the step nothing. We family, and they've essentially been my family all my life. My mother was married in the 80s, so my older siblings have the same family, and then me and my other siblings have different. And my older siblings' father is the father who was raised me and who I was around, who my mother got hooked on the drugs with. So yeah, he was around, but he got wrapped up in the drug stuff like everybody else that got wrapped up in that time.
Okay, so you're growing up in this horrible environment, and at the time you felt that robbing from white people was justified because white people are the reason why you guys were in this situation.
I felt robbing from anybody at the time was justified, but white folks was easy targets because you didn't see them that much. So I mean, like going through Oakland, unless you was by the Coliseum, places like that, it ain't like today. You wasn't just running across no white people running around jogging and all that type of stuff. That wasn't the case. So when you seen them and they seen you, it was already like, ooh, so you already gonna be afraid, but we didn't really go target white people. But if you was out and you seen someone that was a victim, then you was got, period.
Okay. And during this time, you were going to school, but you couldn't actually read or write.
I really wasn't going to school that much. Like, I was enrolled in school. You know what I mean? I was enrolled in school, and I went to school when I went, but school wasn't really, I cut school more than I went by far.
Okay.
By far.
I mean, were you realizing at the time, like, the other kids around you could read and write and you can't, and that's a problem?
Not that it's a problem until you tease me. So I didn't really care that I couldn't read and write until I needed to do it. Like, and if I couldn't read and write all my life, so I've always had a tactic or skill to move without it. So it didn't dawn on me that I couldn't do it until I needed it, or until you said, hey man, you stupid. And then I hit you in your mouth. Then I recognized, oh wow, it's a problem because I'm attacking people who are saying I'm dumb, I'm stupid. And so the word itself has more meaning than what I'm acting like it does. You know what I mean? So I'm pretending like, oh, well, this reading thing ain't really that bad, but yet you call me stupid, that's an attack word. It's like calling me a bitch or a hoe. That's how I associate it with the word.